Let's dive into this newscast with the latest coming in from Hong Kong. As a day after being released on bail, Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai has now warned young protesters to be more careful in their battle against China. Lai was the most high-profile person to be arrested under the new security law. In a live video appearance on Twitter, Lai thanked his supporters, urging patience in a long-term fight for democracy.
This is a long fight, and I agree with it. So we cannot be radical. We cannot really confront them face to face because we are just like an egg and they are high wall. So we can't just do this. We have to be very flexible and innovative and patient, but persist.
Lai also mentioned that the police raid was a violation of Hong Kong people's belief in wide-ranging freedoms, which he likened to oxygen. The media tycoon was arrested from his office on Monday in a dramatic operation that was broadcast live on social media. Lai was swarmed by reporters upon his release from the Mong Kok police station. Many of his supporters also gathered near the police station, waving the latest copy of Jimmy Lai's Apple Daily. The newspaper has seen a massive surge in readership, with the company bumping up publishing from 70,000 to 550,000. Lai's arrest also led to a buying frenzy at the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, which saw his media company's shares rise more than 2,000% at its peak. Lai called the rise in share price an ephemeral phenomenon and urged people not to touch it. While the Hong Kong police have arrested Lai multiple times, arresting him under the new national security law was a first for the media tycoon. His arrest was on suspicion of collusion with foreign forces. The Office of China's Foreign Ministry in Hong Kong has also called Lai an anti-China troublemaker. For more details, let's quickly go across to our correspondent Richard Kimber, who's joining us live from Hong Kong this hour. A very warm welcome to you, Richard. Now, Lai has said that Hong Kong needs patient, not radical democracy campaign. How do you view his strategy, Richard? Is it prudent or tactical?
Well, talking to some of the pro-democracy activists in the last few days after his arrest, there is a growing understanding that really the radical, if you like, actions of the protests on the streets that dominated the headlines around the world of last year are not really going to work again. That's partly because of this new national security law. The powers the police now have here are much stronger than the powers that they had last year, and clearly also the confidence that the police have in enacting those types of powers is much greater than it was last year, based on what we've seen so far in the first 6 months of 2020. So what Jimmy Lai is saying really does make a lot of sense to many pro-democracy activists, because they can see the need to basically try and be more creative, as he says, and also specifically to try and get more international support. This is no longer really a domestic challenge, they say, between Hong Kong protesters and the Hong Kong government. Much more now, they say, this is part of an international effort to try and find ways to deal with China more effectively.
Richard, Lai has also said that he did not expect to be arrested so soon, given the global outcry, and that it suggested chaos in the ranks. How do you assess his statement?
Well, he certainly said that he's long expected to be arrested at some point after this new national security law was introduced. China very clearly said that he was one of what they called the Gang of Four leading pro-democracy activists who were likely to be targets of this type of new legislation. But what, as he said, as you say there, he was not expected to be arrested quite so soon. Everything has happened very quickly in Hong Kong since the law was introduced just a month ago. There have been multiple charges issued to multiple pro-democracy activists for different types of offences. And the judicial system here also has been taken by surprise by quite how quickly this has been enforced. What will happen in the coming weeks, likely, is that as the restrictions are eased for the coronavirus social gathering and social distancing rules, there'll be more efforts by pro-democracy campaigners to try and have more organised forms of protest and more organised forms of rally, which at the moment are simply impossible because of COVID. So that will be an interesting period where suddenly protesters have the ability to effectively do what some of them were doing last year. The question is, will they do that? And Jimmy Lai's advice to them at the moment is don't, and instead find more creative, more international ways to voice your frustration.
Right, and if there is a disconnect in the ranks between Hong Kong and China, we will know very soon. But Richard, last but not the least, how has Lai's arrest arrived as a new rallying point for Hong Kong's fight for democracy, not to forget the other pro-democracy activists and their arrests?
Well, what's really been shown, I think, through this arrest, much more than any of the other charges that have been filed against other pro-democracy activists, is the huge level of public support still for this movement. Of course, nobody went out on the streets particularly, although there were one or two very small protests after his arrest. But the key thing was seeing the public response with regards to the buying of his newspaper, the buying of shares in his company. These were really very high-profile acts that were designed to show a high level of public support in a way that cannot be challenged legally, and also got a huge amount of international visual attention, particularly, of course, what happened to his company's shares. So while many people may have thought these two activities were not necessarily effective forms of protest last year, they're now being seen to be incredibly creative and successful because of the amount of international attention that they've garnered. So I think the key message from this week is that the pro-democracy groups here, whether they be lawmakers or protesters or simply members of the public, are starting to realise that there is indeed still a lot of international interest in the Hong Kong protest story, despite the fact that the national security law has now been implemented.
Absolutely, and how the global community actually shapes up this entire movement is something we'll have to wait and watch. Thank you so much, Richard Kimber, for now, for bringing us all the latest.